Ready? Loud Fog, Writer's Paradise, Session 2, Submission 2, August 2019. Author's Notes. Beginning a journalistic piece contrasting the promise of regenerative farming with commercial beef processing. While it starts with cattle and buffalo as a contrasting pair, my hope is to pivot to grass and to soil. This first section, though, is mainly to set the stage. All the factuals are in various stages of validation. At this stage of writing, the order of presentation is a question for me. So the outline of crop farming 1, 2 beef cattle ranching, 3 traditional buffalo and regenerative farming, maybe switching up a bit in future revisions. The main reason for that is what's becoming clearer to my mind is the story of soil, precisely the relative effect on the soil that each type of agriculture should build. This relative effect is forming in my mind the more I write. And obviously from this note, the writing is solidifying that idea, just not in the piece yet. Simply, I don't think it's presenting the different forms. I don't think it's presenting the different farms from the most destructive to the least destructive. I don't think it's that dogmatic. I believe it has to do with the cycle times of nutrients and microorganisms in the soil. Ultimately, I think it's leaning towards a patchwork of agricultural types applied to fractions and multiples of long cycle rotations. In the end, it isn't the river of grass that we're tending, but we are literally growing the soil, and by doing so, creating the channel of life that allows the grass to flourish. I think that's how this should end. You see the river of grass, learn the agricultures, but go away knowing the soil. And this is only the first part. The more I write, the more it's clear to me that this is an introduction, likely to be edited down, but only an introduction. I'm trying not to rewrite Michael Pollan's The Omnivore's Dilemma, although I love it, but I add wild herd range animals to that agricultural picture. Okay, the river of grass, or a river of grass. 9 million cubic feet of water pass through the railroad town of Edgemont, South Dakota, on its way to the Pine Ridge Reservation each day. Along its course, across some 70 meandering miles of grass and cactus, there is one swimming hole, one town, and one abandoned federal mining installation. The swimming hole was a little larger than a suburban hot tub one would put on their deck. The town, Ulrichs, is mainly ranchers' families and one bar. The mining facility looks and smells like something out of the X-Files. Old World War II wood buildings and brownstone administrative and dormitory buildings, all sitting empty and partially gutted from being exposed and unkept for too many years. The geology in the area would explain the hot springs name being given to a nearby county seat, and the way no plumbing pipes can survive the constant corrosion. The rivers look misty in wintertime, surrounded by snow with steam drifting into the scrub trees nearby. This is the southwestern Black Hills in South Dakota. It is uranium country, and apart from its gateway status to Nebraska, the backdoor it allows to the flatlands of Wyoming, and the federal government's ongoing interest in splitting atoms, it serves no purpose to humans. The low-lying spare streams and rivers range far and cover days' worth of journeys even on today's highways. The slow flow in riverbeds and the sparse moisture in the soil move at the pace of seasons on their way to the Mississippi and the Gulf of Mexico. If you stay long enough, you can watch that river of green come and go. If you study the life there long enough, you can see the building blocks of the animals burst into the brilliance of spring. You can see the change to dry summers and the blinding winters wiping out the memory of green. The wind there keeps the trees hunched over, the snow where it is allowed to stop, and the people moving. To Tatanka, the buffalo, though, the grass fighting that wind is everything. The hardiness of the grass, blue grama, sand dropseed, and little blue stem, the mycelial network stretching across the dry ridges, and the microorganisms in the soil account for the brilliant green of spring in the region. It also accounts for the once robust health of the largest remaining native mammal on the North American continent. A grown American bison can weigh 2 tons. Its liver alone can weigh 7 pounds. The hide, large enough to provide shelter, can stretch 50 square feet. It served as a major source of food for the Native Americans, and now competes with beef cattle on the plains for a place within the food pyramid of the greatest predator on earth, Homo sapien. The conversion of grass to protein has been one that is common to many cultures. It was common to the indigenous peoples of North America as well as to the colonists arriving here on ships. The methods of obtaining any protein source from the rich soil of a region, whether from grown crops or secondarily from the beef cattle or buffalo meat, have been different. It's those differences that affect the grass. While the Cheyenne River area provides few acres of terrain usable by modern agricultural equipment, that means of achieving sufficient food from the land should be presented here. Monocrop farming requires tilling and removal of native species, exposing the soil to erosion and depletion of the store of bound nutrients and microbiological life. The living structural fabric of the soil is broken, and remaining constituents are carried away with the moving water and wind at a disturbing rate. Modern agriculture, spurred on by the petrochemical additions of fertilizer, continues though. So modern corn, wheat, and soy crops can be artificially increased, while the soil's more resilient natural structure of life is destroyed. Alternatively, regenerative agriculture provides alternatives that can substantially increase the rate of soil growth. Part of that solution is better known as grass farming. It produces animals for meat, eggs, or dairy, and together with perennial plants, agriculture, and longer cycles of crop cycling can serve as an important part of the agricultural solution to feed a growing population. Still, in the rough terrain of the high plains, growing the soil is an approach utilizing animals for meat may represent the most balanced and resilient approach available. American beef cattle and the buffalo now serve that purpose and can be seen as two differing approaches. The latter, not defined by the breed itself, but its relationship with the grass, and being pursued by the indigenous people of the area as a resilient and spiritually grounded solution. The former, modern and mechanistic, employs logistics, petrochemically fertilized crops for rapid fattening, and ever-evolving antibacterial medications to keep this cattle alive. Typical commercial beef comes from a process of putting calves out on the grassland to feed until they are full grown and ready for finishing. Considering their size at an average of 1,000 pounds, getting to that state is roughly 16 months. In roughly 16 months is a growth rate that is impressive. That rapid conversion of grass to meat, though, is still insufficient for the American appetite. What it lacks is fat. So at that point, the ranchers come together on horses and motorized quads to bring their herd in. The herd is gathered and transferred to feedlots. Feedlots may well represent one of the closest things to hell on earth that has resulted from our modern commercialized system of agriculture. While it may not compare with the horror of cages and mass production and waste in the chicken and hog industry, it stands out in the life cycle of modern beef because it comes after a relatively free life of range feeding.